Hey, I'm Kev Chemical. Welcome back to WRC 10. As last time out, we ended our run at the October 50th anniversary mode events that were added as we headed to Portugal, to Finland, and then back to Portugal again. But for November, they added 5 more events. So let's get cracking on them as a bit more modern. You know, we don't have any of the Group 4 stuff. We've got not heading to the 80s, not to the Group B era either, which is a bit of a shame. We'd love to see a bit more Group B events. In the end, we only had 4. And so we're heading to Group A and back into the Toyota. So there you come. This is a bit more modern now, though, in 1994, as we're heading to Rally Argentina and a Duel at the top. In the 1994 WRC season, Duel was looking for a new lease of life. By winning 6 rallies 2 years earlier, he had set a record that was the last until 2005. But repeated breakdowns ruined this season and led to the end of his collaboration with Lancia. On the eve of the Rally Argentina, he was in his 2nd year with Toyota and was battling his long-standing rival, 2-time world champion Carlos Sainz. And there is Oil with hair. I remember him without hair. It was like the late 90s, like the mid-90s, still clinging on to it. As he's alongside his co-driver Bernard Orselli. As you can see, we're in the 300 horsepower, 1,120 kilogram Toyota, which will probably handle exactly the same as the 92 and 93 versions, even though they were vastly different. Let's see, we are then. 1994, the 14th Rally Argentina in Cordoba. So with a very familiar stage, aren't we? As we're high up in the clouds, as a crowd and very enthusiastic to see our swing this Toyota through these tight, rocky roads. As he got 5 minutes 50.733 to beat on, it looks like the old El Cordoba stage. Returning to the WRC games, 7.14 kilometers ahead of us. Let's try not to go too far over the rocks and fall off them, or the bridges as well.
4, 3, 2, 1, go. 30, left 2 for right 5. And left 2, tightens, don't cut. Into hairpin right, don't cut.
Oh my god, always reminded how much I enjoy driving these Group A cars in games. Not just in WRC, I love, driving this car in particular. Because you've seen the rocket of the Lancer in this game being DLC and the Impreza, which is a bit weird and disappointing and a bit strange as a Group A car, but the Toyota is pretty cool. And we don't have a event for the Corolla as well, even though it's in the game. But 1994, 27 years ago, Oil and he became the first Frenchman to win WRC crown. The snatch it away from Carlos Sainz and Juha Kankkunen. The big 3 of the WRC in the early 90s. We had the odd outing from like François Delacour as well. And Mickey Gaison. Sebastian. As well, the 2-time WRC champ, the Italian. But it was mostly these 3 fighting for the crowns. And winning them all as well. From 1990 to 1994. And they had already an epic battle, as you probably briefly heard, in 1992, where Oil, despite all those victories, despite being a favourite for most of the season, just ran out of luck, ran out of reliability, and heading to the final round in the RAC Rally in 92, the top 3 were set by just 3 points. For Sainz, Juha Kankkunen and Didi Oil, but Oil didn't finish. Kankkunen finished, but Sainz won. And so Sainz won the title in 92 at the RAC Rally. But 2 years later, heading to Argentina, this is like the midway point of only a 10-round season. We talk about how there's only 7 rounds in 2020. Sure, that's a short season. Well, in the mid-90s, we had short seasons. Before they started expanding again in towards the late 90s with, I think it was like North 1 took over the promotion, started to expand the calendar again, if I remember right, with some heads. And when we introduced like a rotation system for rallies, there's always rallies kind of waiting in the wings as well to host an event. Yeah, only 10 rounds, 94, but at this point, Science was leading the way, joint leading it with Juha Kankkunen, as both 10 points ahead of the Duel. So all he had to put a marker down, he had to win, or at least beat his rivals. And this season was basically Toyota v Subaru. Ford, they did not have a good mid-90s. Didn't have a good 90s in general. Been overtaken by Lancia, by Subaru, by Mitsubishi. And in the end, even by Peugeot and Citroen kit cars as well. Just like the whole of WRC by 99. At least on tarmac. So yeah, Ford led by Mickey in his last season in WRC for the two-time champion, the star of the early Group A era in the late 80s with Lancia. They've been less successful with Ford, and unfortunately didn't end with a great season. Also Bruno Thierry, the Belgian, was a stalwart at Ford in the mid-90s with their Escort. Now, as I said, with Ford not being great, not a great successful period for the Belgium either, but they had a star cast alongside them, while those two were kind of the full-time there, and they had the likes of Ari Vatanen, François Delacour, Tommy Mäkinen even winning his first WRC event at the 1000 Lakes Rally. But of course going on to win many more rallies with Mitsubishi. And Delacour won the season opener at Monte Carlo as well, even though he wasn't a full-time driver. Now Ari Vatanen coming back to a Ford Escort, which was very different from his title-winning one in 1981. This is when Vatanen was kind of in his twilight, doing part-time seasons for the likes of Ford and Subaru. We're finally hanging up his helmet at the end of the 90s. But in the Toyota corner, of course, we had Oil, we had Kankkunen as well. And at Subaru, we had Carlos Sainz and a young, exciting Brit alongside him, called Colin McRae. No, you couldn't see him finishing in the top six here in Argentina. It was Oil beating Sainz with Vatanen in third, in Thierry. Then, the Argentine in the Mitsubishi in fifth, and then Jorge in sixth in the Escort. And from stage to stage, Oil caught up to Sainz and his Subaru and moved ahead after a final 45 kilometer special stage. Oh, I'd love long stages like that nowadays. I know they did it a couple of years ago, didn't they? Like Mexico, but man, it was boring. How dare they try and go back to rallying routes? But yeah, I would love to see longer stages, the WRC. But fortunately, might be a thing of the past now. In rallying in general, as well, modern rallying. But the 6-second lead was the smallest margin recorded in a rally since the 4-second lead at San Marino in 1976. It was a new manufacturer's title for Toyota, and with Digi Oil winning the driver's title, it was the first time a Frenchman had won it during that era. As for Oil, he won in Argentina, won again in Italy, and of course won the title in the end by 17 points ahead of his rival Sainz, with Kankkunen in third, and then Colin McRae in fourth, grabbing a couple of victories in New Zealand, and in the final round in Great Britain, setting up his chance of winning the title in 1995. Bruno Thierry ran out of top 5 ahead of Mickey, and Armin Schwartz leading Mitsubishi's effort before, of course, the young Tommy Mäkinen came along to lead it after this season. And then Delacour, Vatanen, and Mäkinen rounding out the top 10. But yeah, it was a year where Oil finally achieved his dream, and don't remember him too much being a top driver, because I got into rally in like mid to late 90s, and by that time, even though he challenged for the crown in 1999, like he led Toyota's charge. After Sainz came close in 98, it was Oil. In 99, it was battling Mäkinen. Into the final 2 rounds of the season in Australia and Britain, where unfortunately he retired from both rallies. Mäkinen held on from Richard Burns in the end, who won those last 2 rallies to win the crown, and Burns leading Subaru's effort now as Colin McRae moved on to Ford, trying to overturn their fortunes. As I said, a pretty disappointing 1990s effort. And yeah, Oil that was his last great season. Unfortunately, I remember him at Peugeot. He had a very unsuccessful year in 2001, even though he won his last rally, his 20th rally win. He was overshadowed by, Marcus Grönholm, who was already a champion, Harry Von Peer, who had his best season in the WRC, and Gilles Panizzi, who was always exciting on the tarmac and always up there, as well as one of the last ringers in the WRC, at least for manufacturers, that is. And yeah, it was a shame how his career kind of ended, because he had that poor year at Peugeot. He was at I think he was like Seat as well in their pretty poor rally effort, kind of mostly underfunded effort compared to the top guys. Same for Skoda as well, where he basically ended his career a couple of years after Toyota, after Peugeot as well. And even though he had an outing in a Peugeot in 2005, his career basically ended in 2003, I think it was, with Skoda. But yeah, what a driver Oil was. Like, it's been a bit overshadowed, unfortunately, with the other Frenchmen that have come up after him, but he kind of set the way for them in the early 90s, with the likes of Panizzi coming through, with, of course, the Sebastians then with Loeb and Ogier as well coming after him. He, created the way for them. And I think with him now being overshadowed by, of course, those two, he's kind of forgotten about now. Like, I've forgotten about him, and I said watched his era, well, towards the end of his era. But yeah, he's definitely a great rally driver and an important rally driver in history, as I said, with all those fantastic battles in the early mid-90s. But hope you enjoyed some more WRC 10 50th anniversary mode as we move from the mid-90s to the new millennium and the World Rally Cars era, and a guy I had already spoken about with his smooth driving style, with Richard Burns, the late great Richard Burns, his legendary co-driver Robert Reed, and their legendary Subaru Impreza. So we head to the Safari Rally for an Impreza, which was very different from the 97 version, but I'm not sure if it's like that in WRC 10, unfortunately. We'll find out next time though. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.